Hello fashion designers, I'm Miss Osuna and today we are going to work on footwear. So go on ahead, grab your drawing pencil paper and your kneaded eraser and let's get started. So here we're just starting off with the front view foot, and that is the diagonal lines and then the smile. So literally the left side of our smile is lower, that's the big toe. And then don't forget your greater than, less than, or triangular shapes. And on the left side it's higher at the ankle and the right side is lower. Then you're just going to divide by drawing 4 lines. The first one is for that big toe and all the way down to the little toe. Then just place a little rectangle for the rest of our toes. Make sure you make the big toe have a larger rectangle, and that is for the toenail. Now simply do a simple smile or a parenthesis type shape to pull out each toe. So it's sort of a parenthesis facing left and right around each toe, or a smile that goes deeper. Now you're just going to go on the left side and the right side and make the platform of this shoe with a parenthesis shape and then a smile upward. Remember, the left side is lower, right side higher. Here on the far right side, we are going to frown over towards the left, and that is the edge of our shoe. And then we're going to make a diagonal because this is a designer shoe. Notice that the diagonal shape starts on the far right by the little toe, goes over towards the left, and then back to the right. Now we are making the left side of this shoe, and as you follow along, just draw it slightly to the left of the foot. Now just straight lines to extend those toes just a tiny bit for that toe cleavage. Now we are going to happily move on to the next. So we are going to slide over our paper and place 2 more diagonal lines. Make sure they're more narrow at the top and wider at the bottom. Of course, that is because the ankle is where it's more narrow and it's wider at the toe. The left side is lower for our smile, right side higher, same as before. And put your dividing lines so that we can have room for all 5 toes. Place your frown and then a rectangle. So frown first on the bottom edge of those toenails and then the rest of the rectangle. And that gives you your toenails. Now, straight lines to just extend those toes for the cleavage. And then put in your parenthesis shapes or your smile shapes at the edges of the toe. Next, we are going to put in our platform for our heel. So on the left side, it's a straight line down. Same for the right side. It's a little bit angled on the right side, and then place your smile. So this is a slightly different because we have a second smaller smile at the bottom of this platform. So that gives you a whole different look. Next, we are going to create a frown shape, and it is lower on the left side, higher on the right slightly, so it's a diagonal strap. Remember, 1 strap means 2 lines. So these frown shapes, there are 2 to represent 1 strap. Here we are repeating this process because this is a very strappy platform. Of course, you can design these any way that you want. I'm going to choose to make this neck strap at an angle. And once again, make sure they are to the left or the outside of the width of the foot, and then have a little smile or a comma to connect it back to your foot. Now we simply add our last smile for the ankle strap. So this is a very strappy, but a slightly different looking platform. All of these different looks are going to be useful when you design your different designs. Just go back in on the left and right. Make sure that the shoe itself is wider slightly than the foot. Okay, we are gonna move right on along. And you can also use, instead of your hand to wipe away eraser marks, you can also use a brush. So I'm using a watercolor brush that's pretty wide. Of course, make sure it's dry. So now we're starting off with our diagonal lines, more narrow at the top, wider at the bottom. Left side lower, that's our big toe. Put in your ankle. And of course, your 4 lines to separate the toes. The biggest toe is on the left. And for those toenails, you start with a frown and then you make the rest of your rectangle shape. And now you add your parenthesis shapes or your smiles so that you can show the rest of the toes. Of course, you can make your toes long and thin, or you can make them short as the way I'm showing them here. There's all different ways to do it. Now for the shoe, we have the left side and right side fairly straight. Then you're going to put in your smile. And now we are going to have a frown, and this frown is diagonal. And I'm just going to go on ahead and shade that in. You see how it's thinner than the last sketch that we did. Next, my next 2 straps are going at an opposite angle, and notice they crisscross towards the right side of our sketch. They're not crisscrossing exactly in the middle. Once again, these are all just simply design choices, but these slight changes help your croquis to look different than the croquis standing right next to it. So on the left and right side, I'm just going to go on ahead and shade a tiny bit just to give that shadow, and I'll lower that front of our platform. Notice that the shading started with the smile shapes, and then on the far left side, I went up and down. But the smile shapes were how we started. This is also the same way that you will color if you are using markers. You would do the same technique with the smile and then up and down if you were also using watercolor. Here, I'm going to just simply add an ankle strap. And once again, make sure it is to the left and right, a little wider than the ankle itself, and that parenthesis shape to smile back connecting to the ankle. Now we're going to do something different. So 2 diagonal lines. This time the right side is lower, left side higher. So we're showing a left foot as you look at it. Place your ankle. Technically, I should say this is the foot on the left side of the sketch. And then what we are going to do is place the right foot as if she's walking slightly behind the first foot near the ankle. So when you do that, go on ahead and draw right on top of that first foot and then go back and erase later. Now we have our peep toe, and yours could be round. I just have my peep toe angled. And add in the front of your actual platform heel. The platform heel is really popular because it gives the extra height to the model, but also it gives that support. So you will see a lot of different styles of platform type shoes used in fashion shows and in photo shoots, mostly for that reason. After shading in your heel, go on ahead and put your toes and your rectangles for the toenail. The big toe, you can only see a little bit of it because part of it is hidden behind our peep toe. Now this is going to be a different style than the last, of course. So our T-strap is what we are working on here. It's wider at the bottom, more narrow at the top. And then we have one more set of straps right at the ankle, and it's a very thick strap. For the second foot, you are only going to see a very tiny bit of that T-strap. And then we'll just simply add in the heel, but taking good care to remember that you see much less of this foot on the right side of the sketch. Draw in your toes, and once again remember that the big toe is slightly hidden behind our peep toe, so you only see a portion of it. As I finish this sketch with a few more lines to shadow, I also will add in a little bit more detail. Some of that detail will include the ankle bone on the foot for the left side. And so try to remember that you can do all different sizes of croquis, all different shapes. I'm sketching in a larger size, but you can obviously draw this in the larger size because I'm doing it so you can actually see on the video, and then just shrink it down and trace it onto the croquis that you have that is smaller. Same exact technique, just smaller, or you can just redraw it smaller. Now moving on for the next example here. We have our diagonal lines and our ankle. We are separating out the toes. Start off with the frown and then add the rest of your rectangle for your toenails, and then we'll move on from there. This design is going to be different still, and of course these are all just to give you inspiration. So make sure you put the parenthesis shapes to separate all the toes, and then we will move forward. So from the far right side of our sketch, go on ahead and place the heel that's slightly facing left on the parenthesis, and do the same on the left side and add in your smile for the very bottom. And of course it's wider than the foot because the shoe is wider than the actual foot itself. And then we're going to put a parenthesis shape like triangles facing the right. So this is like a triangle or a greater than, less than sign facing the right. Then add some commas at the center because this is a gathered design. So this particular shoe has gathers, and now you're going to see as we do the left side, these parenthesis shapes aim toward the left. They're also wider than the actual foot itself, and then put in those gather lines or those parenthesis shapes at the center and then on the left edge. And then for the right side of the sketch, put it at the center and then on the right edge. This is giving us a very different feel, even still. Although you can see this is a very similar shoe, but you can do it in a million different ways. Now our next detail in this case, wider on the left, more narrow on the right, and add those gathers. So this is a soft fabric that is able to be gathered in, but it's thick enough to provide the support that you need. So add those parenthesis shapes for a smile on the left and right sides, and then extend those lines toward the center, making sure that you don't fill it in entirely. And now we're going to add a second set. And it's wider on the right, more narrow on the left. So down at the bottom by the toe, you have two, and then you have one above it, which is the first part, and then you have one more above that. That's our second portion of the set. and place those gather lines from the left side and the right side. Now we're going to do this once again, and so you get the feeling that this is being wrapped all the way around the leg of the model. Add in your gather lines on the left side and the right side, and once again, if you are using marker or watercolor, you would still use the same movement of a smile shape so that you can capture these gather lines. All right, let's go on ahead and move forward. Now we are going to do a shoe that is facing left. So you come down and then you go towards the left with that triangle shape. I've rounded my toe slightly. Then you're going to go back up towards the right and then a backward letter C for the ankle, and drag your ankle shapes upward. So that is our shoe facing the left side. This is going to be a very high heel. And of course, you can make them as high or as low as you like. So now you're going to see a strap behind the ankle. And that strap is wider at the bottom by the heel, and it's more narrow at the ankle. Now add in a smile, and that is the top of our shoe. Then I'm adding a tiny little bit to darken at the heel. And I'll just darken at the bottom of our shoe from the toe back towards the ball of the foot. We are going to do the same thing, except this time it's not quite as high as the first, and it's longer. So sometimes you want to show a longer foot, and that is just all depending on what you're designing. So add that frown shape and make sure it's a tiny bit wider than the shoe itself. And now the back of our heel has a slight curve in the beginning and then it's straight at the bottom. And then go on ahead and close off the bottom of that heel and add a rectangle. Now we're just going to add the bottom of our shoe starting at the toe, and you're just going to follow that up around. And as you follow it, you're going to go all the way to the back by your ankle. Make sure you have that parenthesis shape to connect it to the ankle. I'm just going to darken this so that, of course, you can really see the detail here. And once I'm done with that, we will move on. Now we're going to add a strap. So because this is turned to the side, the strap is actually in the middle. Just make sure that it goes to the right of our ankle, slightly longer or wider than the ankle. And I'll darken that as well. Next, I'm just going to flatten the top edge here of our foot, and then we will move on to shadow the top of our shoe. So these are going to be frown shapes. So from the left side, you're frowning downward, and then you go up and down after you do the frown shapes. And then from the right side, you are frowning, and you're frowning over towards the left. and just go on and extend those lines a little bit. Then you can go back and define that outer edge. It's always darker on those outer edges. And here we're going to go with a smile that's higher than the edge of the actual shoe. And then place in your toes and the toe nails. Sometimes if you have a full-on profile, you won't see any of the other toes. You'll just see the big toe. So it just depends on how far you have turned your foot. And next we are going to squeeze one more. Notice they're all similar but slightly different. So I'm using similar styles but showing you how you can change them. So here we have the same profile of the foot. This is a longer foot. As I mentioned, there are times when you want to show a longer foot and sometimes a shorter foot like the first one there. Add in that ankle. And make sure you have that backward letter C for the back of our heel. That's the back of your ankle. And now let's go on ahead and draw in the details. Here we are with a straight line that is slightly turned at the toe, slightly aiming toward the right. And then you have the bottom, which is horizontal. And now as we go back up, it gets more narrow. And then you want to make sure you have your straight line and your backward letter C for the back of our heel. And draw in the shape of the high heel itself. These are going to be nice and thick. Once again, that's a style that's super popular because it actually does give support to the wearer. Place your frown. Make sure it's a little wider than the actual foot itself. And touch up some of those details. Now you want to be very careful as you move forward and draw in, like I said, some of the toe. You might not see all of it depending on which way your foot is turned. You might only see, for example, 2 or 3 toes depending on the angle. I'm going to do this one just like the one before it to make sure that you really can practice. Because when you practice the same thing over and over with slight changes, it gives you muscle memory. So after you place those toes and those toenails, just as we did before, we can move on to the next detail. Okay, so the next bit of detail, once you finalize your sketches, is to transfer those over to your marker paper. And then take your kneaded eraser and erase most of the lead so that you don't muddy it up. And now we're going to move on to color with our markers. So going ahead and start off with whatever skin tones you like. I'm using a caramel color here. And I'm on the far left side, which is my shadow side. You want to reinforce the same technique over and over again so that you can move quickly when you're on the job and accurately. So I typically just choose the left side for the shadow side, and this shoe also is facing the left. Now I'm moving on to color number 2, and this is a bigger jump. This is going into a chocolate. Normally I have shades that are very close together, but for some of you, I know you've purchased a packet that comes and literally they don't have shades that are close together. They have a lot of different shades. So this technique will work for you. So I've put down my chocolate, and now I'm going to go back to color number 1, that caramel color, and go right in the middle so that I can start to transition. So when you wet over that chocolate with the caramel, you're able to make the beginnings of a transition. And then of course my light side is on the far right. And once again, I'm add a little more chocolate to the far left, and you'll see we'll repeat this process over and over again of going back and forth between the darker. So notice I'm spreading more chocolate now on top of that caramel, and then I will switch over and blend it in because I really want to have a very dark skin tone for this particular sketch. And also, once again, you can choose whatever color you like. You don't even have to use real skin tones. You can use purple or blue or green or whatever. So see, now the caramel color goes on top of it and it wets the surface, picks up some of the chocolate, and then now I have that left over on my brush tip, and I can use that in the light side. So it makes a gradient effect, the leftover chocolate that's on my actual brush tip. Now that I have the majority of it covered, I'm going to go in for an umber far left side and pull out even a deeper shadow. So that umber and chocolate, those are the two that are close together in their actual tones. And you can see that shadow side now starts to really jump forward. Now I'm going back into that first color and I am wetting that shadow side and pulling it over. So you just repeat this process over and over again. I'm pulling it over into the light side, and as you layer each time around, it just becomes more blended. Now for the transition, I have a sienna colored pencil. So literally I am going in small circles and I can soften that transition with colored pencil on top of the marker. Now that I've blended the skin tone, I'm moving on to the footwear, and I'm doing black, and we will just add a tiny bit of gray to this, only in those areas for a transition. So notice on my shadow side, I am starting, so that's the left side. I am defining that upper edge, and look, there's a little bit of color on the light side. So it's not as much when you first start, and then you add to it. So now back on that shadow side again, I'm going to go on ahead and define the bottom edge. And remember, black is very, very heavy. So always do a little bit at a time, as you see here, then add more. So I'm leaving some white spaces and I'm moving in a left-right motion. And those white spaces are going to just help to add light reflection. I'm doing this in a smile shape so that I can really mimic the actual light reflection. Now I have that dark gray and I'm just barely taking away some white spaces. So at the edge of the black, I am going to a dark gray. And that just helps to make that transition from the dark black into the white. Next, I'm going to move on and put black for the strap and for the heel. Notice I start at the top and then the bottom, and then I'm leaving some white in the center, and then I'll take that away little by little. As I move on towards the heel itself, I will also leave a little tiny bit of white. That just helps to let the light reflect. So when I say leaving some white space, I mean a spot in the center of the strap where there is no color at all. It's just plain paper. That's the white that you see. So I will do that as well on my heel. There'll be bits, tiny bits of reflective light just by leaving it plain and untouched. And I'm doing that in a sort of a elongated shape. Now I'm just going to go back in with my dark gray and knock down some of those light spaces so that it transitions from black into dark gray and then the white. All right, we are off to a great start. Now I'm moving on to deepen those shadows with black colored pencil. And just as an FYI, the black colored pencil shows up even darker than the black marker. So I'm mostly softening at the edges and on the shadow side, and then I use my dry watercolor brush to remove any specks of colored pencil instead of smearing my hand or blowing it. And now I have a black fine point pen, and I'm just going to define the edge where the sole of the shoe is and where the arch of the foot is. Sometimes your black colored pencil stops the fine point from showing up, so just scribble it on a page that's scratch paper and then it'll work again. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. We are going to move on to part 2 in the next video. I'll look forward to seeing you there.